You already know, you just don't hold it. You already know what to do. That's what makes this harder to accept. You've seen the pattern clearly. You've felt the misalignment. You've had that moment where everything clicked and you said to yourself, this isn't right. You didn't need anyone to explain it to you. You didn't need more time. You didn't need more evidence. You knew. And not only did you know, you acted on it. You stepped back, you created distance, you pulled yourself out of something that wasn't working. And for a moment, it felt like progress. It felt like control. It felt like you finally chose yourself. But then something happened. Not externally, internally. The clarity didn't hold. The decision didn't stick. The space you created started to feel uncomfortable. The silence got louder. The emotions shifted. And before you realized it, you weren't holding your decision anymore. You were negotiating with it. You were questioning it. You were slowly undoing it. And eventually, you went back. Not because you didn't understand, because you didn't maintain control when it mattered. That's the difference. This is not about awareness. This is about execution. You don't need closure. You need discipline. Clarity does not override your default response. Understanding something does not mean you will act on it. That's one of the biggest misconceptions people carry. They think that once something becomes clear, their behavior will automatically follow that clarity. That once they see the pattern, they'll stop participating in it. That once they understand what's happening, they'll make different decisions. That's not how behavior works. Behavior is not controlled by your highest level of understanding. It's controlled by your lowest level of tolerance. In calm moments, you can think clearly. You can analyze. You can recognize what's happening. You can make decisions that align with your long-term interest. But those moments are not where your pattern is defined. Your pattern is defined in the moment where discomfort appears, the moment where your system gets activated, the moment where something feels off, uncertain, empty, or tense. That's where your real response shows up. And in those moments, clarity gets overridden. Not because it disappears, but because something stronger takes over. The need to reduce discomfort. The need to return to familiarity. The need to remove the internal pressure you're feeling. And if your response to that pressure is to go back, then it doesn't matter how clear you were before. Your behavior will follow your tolerance, not your understanding. That's why you can know exactly what to do and still not do it. You keep waiting for discipline to feel natural. Most people are waiting for the moment where doing the right thing feels easy, where holding the boundary feels natural, where walking away doesn't feel uncomfortable, where not going back feels obvious. That moment doesn't come first. That moment comes later, after repetition, after exposure, after you've already gone through the discomfort enough times that your system starts to adjust. But in the beginning, discipline feels unnatural. It feels forced. It feels like you're going against yourself. It feels like you're holding tension instead of releasing it. And because it feels that way, most people assume something is wrong. They assume they're not ready. They assume they need more clarity, more time, more certainty before they can act consistently. But that's backwards. Readiness doesn't come before action. It comes after repeated action. The more you follow through, the more natural it becomes. The less you follow through, the more resistance builds. So when you're sitting there waiting for discipline to feel easy, what you're actually doing is delaying the only thing that would make it easier. You don't become disciplined by feeling ready. You become disciplined by acting before you feel ready and staying consistent long enough for your system to catch up. You are misinterpreting discomfort as a signal to stop. The moment you try to do something different, your system reacts. Not because you're making a bad decision, but because you're breaking a familiar pattern. Familiarity creates predictability. Predictability creates a sense of safety. So when you disrupt that pattern, Even if the pattern was unhealthy, your system doesn't interpret that disruption as growth. It interprets it as uncertainty, and uncertainty creates discomfort. That discomfort can show up in subtle ways: restlessness, doubt, overthinking, emotional pull, a sense that something is missing. And instead of recognizing that as a normal response to change, you interpret it as a warning. You think, maybe I was wrong, maybe I moved too fast, maybe I should go back and fix this. But what you're actually responding to is not a signal that you made the wrong decision. You're responding to the absence of familiarity. And if you continue to interpret discomfort as danger, you will always return to what feels known, even if what's known is what's keeping you stuck. This is the exact moment you keep failing. This is where it happens. Not in the beginning, not when everything is clear, not when you make the decision. It happens after, when the silence sets in, when the space you created starts to feel unfamiliar, when the emotional intensity drops and is replaced with something quieter, something less defined, something harder to sit in. That's the moment you keep failing. That's the moment where you reach for something to fill the gap, where you check, where you respond, where you reopen something you already closed. And every time you do that, you reset the process. You go back to the beginning. You don't build distance. You interrupt it. You don't weaken the pattern. You reinforce it. And then you wonder why nothing changes. It's not because you don't understand. It's because you don't hold your position when the discomfort appears. That moment is the entire game. And until you change how you respond there, everything else stays the same. You are conditioning yourself to break your own decisions. Every time you decide something and then reverse it, you're teaching yourself something. You're creating a pattern of your own, a pattern where your decisions don't last, where your boundaries are temporary, where your clarity is negotiable. And over time, that becomes your baseline. You stop trusting yourself, not because you lack awareness, but because your actions don't match your decisions. You say one thing and then you do another. And your system learns from that. It learns that your decisions are flexible under pressure, that they don't hold when discomfort increases. So the next time you try to make a change, there's less internal stability behind it, less conviction, less trust, because you've already shown yourself that you don't follow through. This is how inconsistency becomes identity, not through a single failure, but through repeated moments where you choose relief over alignment. Relief is what you are actually chasing. When you go back, it feels like resolution. It feels like you fixed something. It feels like the tension is gone. But what you actually did is remove discomfort. That's it. You didn't solve the problem. You didn't change the structure. You didn't create something new. You returned to something familiar because it removed the pressure you were feeling. And because that relief feels immediate, your system starts associating going back with feeling better. Not with long-term outcomes, not with growth, not with alignment, just with relief. And that becomes the driver. Not logic, not clarity, relief. And once relief becomes the goal, you will always choose the option that feels easier in the moment, even if it costs you later. Discipline is the ability to not act on the urge. Discipline is not about forcing yourself to feel different. It's about controlling your response when you don't feel right. It's about not acting on the urge the moment it appears. That's it. It's simple, but it's not easy. Because the urge feels real. It feels important. It feels like something you need to respond to immediately. But you don't. The urge is temporary. It spikes and then it fades. But most people never experience the fade because they act too quickly. They remove the discomfort before it has a chance to pass. And by doing that, they train themselves to depend on that reaction. Discipline interrupts that. It creates a gap between feeling and action. And in that gap, you regain control. You need to build a delay, not a perfect plan. You don't need a better strategy. You don't need more analysis. You don't need to think this through again. You've already done that. What you need is time between the urge and the action. A delay, even if it's small. 30 seconds, a minute, 5 minutes. That delay changes everything because it gives your system time to settle. It gives your mind time to re-engage. It prevents automatic reactions. And once you create that space consistently, your response starts to change. Not because you forced it, because you stopped reacting instantly. This is where it actually changes. You don't need closure. You don't need another conversation. You don't need more clarity. You already have enough information to make a different decision. What you don't have is consistency in holding that decision when it becomes uncomfortable. That's the part you avoid. That's the part that feels difficult. That's the part that actually creates change. Because change doesn't happen when things are clear. It happens when things are uncomfortable and you still follow through. That's where the pattern breaks. That's where your identity shifts. That's where you stop going back. Not because you finally understood it, because you finally held your position long enough for something to change. Thank you for watching. This is MindStickz.